By the end of this video, you'll be able to turn any spreadsheet into executive-ready insights in under an hour. I'm going to show you the exact 4-step framework that I follow, which I call the Uber framework, and I'll test every step of the framework with you so you can see what happens when you follow the right process. Now, in this case, let's assume that we're working with a dataset that comes from Uber, and our main task is to figure out what are the main reasons for cancellations. Now, this is the mistake that I see juniors doing over and over. They get a spreadsheet, they immediately start sorting some data, making 6 random charts, then they spend 3 hours rearranging them, and they hope a story will come up. And the reason why this approach is failing is because it skips the most important step of the process, and it's a step that actually with AI you can do in about 2 minutes. And that step is understand your data. By the way, I will run this example with Copilot because that's what many big corporates give you access to, but this works with any AI tool out there. What's important again is the process. Now, the first thing to do is get crystal clear what kind of data are we working with. You can see over here the raw data with tons of rows and not a lot of context. So what I'm first going to do is load this file into Copilot and get understanding of the data that I have in the file with a prompt like this. Analyze the attached spreadsheet and return a summary table with the following for each column. The column name, the detected data type, whether it's numeric, categorical, text, maybe something else, a sample of values with 5 to 10 representative values so you can get an idea on how the dataset looks like, and please present the results in a clear, readable format to help me understand the dataset structure. And you will see Copilot is thinking for a while, but after a bit, it just gave me this table over here where it shows the different columns we have, so right ID, date, region, country, cancelled by, and so on. What kind of data type it is, so for example, date is in a date format, and here you can see that it's actually formatted as year, and then month, and then day, or for example, region, it's a categorical one, and you have Europe, North America, Asia Pacific, Latin America. So in a very quick glance, you get an idea on what kind of variables you have, and you get a feeling on, for example, when we talk about the region variable, what kind of regions are we talking about? And here we see it's at the level of Europe, North America, APAC, and so on. After this, what you want to do is understand if your data set is complete, because there might be some outliers or some missing cell values that could mess up your analysis later on. So it's good that you know about them upfront. Now, to do this, you can use a prompt like this. Review the dataset and identify any data quality issues that could impact my analysis on reasons for cancellation. Specifically, check for missing values, outliers that seem unrealistic, inconsistent formatting across columns, and any data quality issues that could affect my cancellation analysis. Present the findings in a structured and easy-to-read format, either table or bullet points. And well, as you can see, Copilot did a bit of a Python analysis, and after that, it came back with an overview on what columns have the most missing values. So we see, for example, driver rating is missing 2.3% of the values. We see there are also some outliers with unrealistic values. Like, for example, there is this variable called driver wait time minutes. And what you can see is that there are 14 records in which this waiting time is of 60 minutes, which according to Copilot might be too much, but it's also up to you to use your personal judgment to understand if these are realistic values and you should keep in, or if they are really outliers and you might want to clean it up before you run any analysis. It's also interesting, for example, is that it found some inconsistent formatting in some of the variables, like some leading spaces that shouldn't be there, or some cities that sometimes are written fully in uppercase. And there are some more elements like this that you might want to have a look. And the good thing is that for every inconsistency that it's finding, it's also suggesting how you can fix it so that you can have a clean data set when you start doing analysis. Now, with such a large file, doing this kind of analysis could have taken me easily half an hour manually, if not even longer. And now with AI, it's done in less than a minute, which is actually pretty cool. All right, so now we understand better what's the data landscape we're dealing with, and we know that there is some cleanup to do when we go into Excel. But usually, here's where I see most people doing the second big mistake. They start diving into the data analysis without a clear plan and just building charts and pivot tables, hoping that something will pop up. But going back to my puzzle analogy, that would be like trying to solve a puzzle by randomly grabbing pieces and trying to force feed them. So instead, the right thing to do here is implementing step 2, breaking down the business question. Before you create any single chart or pivot table, you need to ask yourself, why do I want to know this information? We of course already know the what, in this case the key drivers of right cancellations, but defining the why is what will ensure that there's a business rationale behind your analysis, and it allows you to be laser sharp into which data points you should focus on. In this case, for example, it might be that we got this question because we are losing market share in Europe. So then you know that for your analysis, you can ignore any data point that is not related to Europe. Or it could be that we got this question because we believe that driver waiting times are too long and it's frustrating our consumers. And in that case, most likely you would focus entirely on timing data. So as you can see, knowing your why really changes which data is important for this analysis. And that's why here, the best move to do is to engage early on with your stakeholders to really try to grasp why they have that question, what's the actual reason behind it. And yes, I know that scheduling another meeting can sound quite painful, but trust me, after more than 10 years in corporate roles, I can tell you that this 15-minute engagement with your stakeholders early on can save you tons of hours and tons of rework later down the process. Now, for this example again, let's assume that the reason why we want to run this data analysis is because we are losing market share in Europe. The next thing you want to do is to break down the problem further by using a framework that is called the MECE framework, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, which might sound very complicated, but it's actually very simple. Let me explain. MECE just means that when you break down a problem into smaller categories, these categories should cover everything, so they should be collectively exhaustive, but they should not overlap with each other, so they should be mutually exclusive. Now, if I would do this kind of analysis myself on a whiteboard, probably it would take me like an hour to find all these different categories. But now with AI, you can do it very quickly with a simple prompt like this one. Analyze Uber ride cancellations in Europe to understand potential causes of market share loss versus competition. To do so, 1. Apply the MECE framework to break down possible cancellation drivers into 3 to 4 main categories. 2. For each category, list 2 to 3 specific testable hypotheses that could explain higher cancellation rates. And 3. Ensure that categories are non-overlapping and comprehensive, and the hypotheses are realistic and data-driven, referencing the dataset fields. Present the findings in a structured framework, showing the categories, the hypotheses, and any key dataset columns to test each of the hypotheses. This kind of prompt takes a while to run. In my case, it took roughly 3 minutes, but you can see the result is quite impressive. Copilot essentially broke down the problem into 4 distinct categories, and for each category, you can see that it includes a testable hypothesis, like for example, in this case, lower driver ratings correlate with higher cancellations, and it also indicates which columns you need to look into if you want to test that hypothesis. Like for example, in this case, you should filter by Europe, and you should use the driver rating column, interactions that it would have with the cancel by reason, and you could segment by the city, by the ride type, or by the time of the day. Now, if you work in big corporations, you know that you will have to juggle this data analysis in between meetings, and when that happens, it's very easy to lose direction. But having this framework completely prevents that from happening, because you can always go back to it and use to guide the execution of your analysis, which is actually the third step of my framework. Now, at this point, you already got your framework with 8 to 10 hypotheses to test. And from this point, you could go actually to Excel, build a pivot table for the first one, maybe make a graph, check some numbers, and check if that hypothesis is true. And from there, move to the next one and do that 8 to 10 times depending on how many hypotheses you have to test. But realistically, that will take you at least your entire afternoon, assuming that you don't have any meetings in between. But with Copilot, there's a much faster way to do this that most people skip, and it's using Copilot's analyst agent instead. Now, if you have not seen this before, let me quickly show you how to trigger it. Essentially, you need to click here the plus button, and over here you click on Analyst. And as you can see, it will say over here, Analyst is responding, which essentially means that any prompt that I put now in Copilot, it will be taken care of by the Analyst agent. Now, if you have not seen this before, let me show you what happens when I use the following prompt. Please run a thorough analysis following all the hypotheses that I listed above. For each hypothesis, state whether the hypothesis is supported, partially supported, or not supported at all by the data. And this is again one of those prompts that will take 2 to 3 minutes to run, but look at the results because they are quite impressive. It literally went through every single hypothesis for every category that we had, and for each of them it summarized here in a table whether the hypothesis is partially supported or not supported at all. So for example, that hypothesis that we were checking before, whether low driver ratings are a reason for cancellations, actually it turns out that it's not supported, which is not something that I would have guessed right away. Here what I would typically do is create a couple of charts to visualize those data points that I find the most interesting, because what you don't want to do is to trust Copilot blindly. You still want to double check that the analysis that has been done is actually correct, and you want to also add your personal judgment into it. So for it, what I'm going to do is jump back into Excel, turn on Copilot, and for example, prompt something like create a chart in a separate sheet mapping the amount of cancellations because the AC is not working per month in Europe. And this is also not the fastest prompt, to be honest, also takes a couple of minutes, but you can see that I got this new sheet with a clear chart, and honestly, I still find quite impressive that Copilot was able to do all of this on its own. And this you can do systematically, basically with all other hypotheses that you want to visualize before fully trusting Copilot blindly. Alright, so once we have the full analysis done and we created visualizations for all those hypotheses that we found the most interesting, it's time for the fourth step of the framework, which is recommending with a storyline. And this is again where many juniors drop the ball, because they just put all these charts into PowerPoint slides and they just bring it to their manager hoping that they will make a sense out of it. But the thing is, your manager doesn't want to see the work that you have done, but but they want to see the conclusions that you reach with your work. Now, this video is not about how to structure presentations. I've actually done a video on this before, but let me explain what is the most common mistake I see, because once you fix it, all your presentations immediately will look more senior. Now, look for example at this common slide. The title says AC cancellations per month, and indeed the chart is showing the bars going up in summer. But when your manager sees this, they will be there thinking like, okay, so what am I supposed to do with this? Because the title is just describing the chart. There's nothing here that they cannot see already with their eyes. So instead, what you want to do is to make sure that the title has the conclusion of your slide. So not just a generic AC cancellations per month, but something like ensuring AC is in good condition would cut cancellations by 30%. Now, when your manager is reading this title, they immediately understand what's the point that you're trying to convey, what is the action that you're asking them to take, and essentially the chart is just supporting that conclusion that you put in the title. And you also want to make sure that you don't communicate more than one message per slide. So actually the way to know if you nail this is what I call the title test. If someone can read just your slide titles in sequence and understand your entire argument without seeing a single chart, your storyline is perfectly working. And if they cannot, then it's not clear enough yet. And of course, what is key here and along the entire process is to use your critical thinking skills to refine the guidance that AI is giving you. Now, you definitely want to avoid taking everything that AI gave you and reusing it right away. And instead, think of it as a tool to do all the heavy lifting while you are still the one steering the ship and making the final calls. Because the moment you stop thinking critically and you just copy-paste whatever AI is giving you, you can end up like these guys over here. And I am no lawyer myself, but I believe saying, Copilot told me so is not the best defense argument you can use. And that was the Uber framework. Now, if there is one thing that I would like you to take out of this video is that prompts don't matter as much as the process. Tools will change, there will definitely be new features coming into AI, but as long as you understand how to structure your process and you follow this framework of understand, break down, execute, and recommend, you can adapt this process to any AI tool that will come in the future. Don't forget to like the video. If it was interesting for you, please leave a comment below. I reply to all of them, and I'll see you next time. Bye.